So Codex is like better than Claude now? Is that the idea?
Well, I wouldn't say it's as simple as that, but, definitely from our reporting and the story that we published yesterday, we have seen that a lot of developers in recent months, especially since OpenAI came out with its Codex desktop app in February, have been switching over to Codex, which is, OpenAI's kind of coding and general purpose agent, um, versus, Anthropic's products like Claude Code and Claude Cowork.
Okay, so Codex is getting some traction. How is OpenAI capitalizing on that then?
Yeah, so as the company announced yesterday, there has really been this big push towards combining Codex, ChatGPT, and other OpenAI products into a single desktop app. So this is something that OpenAI has been working on for a couple months now, and it sounds like they are gearing up to release this so-called super app in the upcoming weeks. And so basically, from the developers and OpenAI leaders that I spoke to, the company has realized within recent months that the software behind Codex is actually much better at, not only coding tasks, but also any sort of, knowledge work tasks you might ask an agent to do. So writing emails, looking at, Google Docs, looking at spreadsheets, editing spreadsheets. Codex is basically better at all those things compared to ChatGPT. So the company has basically been saying, all right, if we know Codex is better, why not bring the Codex capabilities inside of ChatGPT, which obviously is used by, over 900 million weekly active users at this point.
And when you say that the back end is better, are you talking about like is it a different version of the model that is powering Codex that is better for ChatGPT-esque tasks? Is that the idea or
Mhm. So historically, like there have been points where ChatGPT and Codex are using kind of different models, but what I've heard is, I guess maybe just to break this down, when you have something like Codex, you have the underlying model, GPT 5.5 or whatever number you're on at that point. Then you have something called a harness, which is basically all of the software around that model. So this is a software that helps the model, take actions on your computer or use a browser or go into your email and look at your email. So this is kind of the software that really helps the model be useful to the user. And essentially, what I've heard is that because at OpenAI, within the Codex team, they were building the model and the harness at the same time under the same team. Those two things really worked super well together, versus ChatGPT and many other products at the company, the models and the products are actually being built under separate teams. So maybe the
Hmm.
models are being built under research, the products are being built under the applied team. And so in this case, because they were able to build that model and that harness together, it just made them just like a dream team, apparently, according to developers that we talked to. And so that has really kind of made the Codex uh, app a lot better at, longer running tasks. So things
Hmm,
that
hmm.
might take hours instead of minutes, or really complex tasks where you might be working with numbers within a spreadsheet and you need to be able to write code and all these sorts of things.
So when we look at then how Claude has Anthropic has developed Cowork, and I know that within the Claude app, I mean, because this is different if you're on PC or on Mac. I have a PC. I know on Macs you're supposed to have Claude and then Claude Code, and then Cowork. All they're like separate tabs basically within the one application. Um, is this at all OpenAI's answer to Claude Cowork, or is this not really jumping into the agentic territory? It's really just unifying the product. It's more of that.
So I would say that you're correct. They're definitely taking a page from Anthropic's playbook. I think essentially OpenAI has seen the success of Claude Code, and then, coming off of that coding specific tool, Anthropic came out with Claude Cowork, which is this more general purpose kind of agent. And I think OpenAI saw that and they were like, wait, we also have similar capabilities. We've also been really focused on coding models. Like, why don't we do something kind of like that? And so now I think they're looking at, Codex, which is coding specific, and they're saying, okay, how can we expand this and make it more broad and more for just any sort of knowledge worker, whether you're an investment banker, a salesperson, a
Right.
journalist, anyone.
But it doesn't have agentic capabilities just yet, does it?
So it actually does. So there are, a bunch of things that you can do with the Codex app. So um, you can connect it to a lot of the apps that you use. So you might connect it to your Gmail, to your Google Drive. So it can actually go and like write emails for you or create files within Google Drive or check your Slack messages. There's also this other feature called computer use, which basically means that Codex can, spin up a little browser basically within the app and click around in the browser and basically just do anything that you might do in your browser. So maybe you wanted to like check LinkedIn to see who has recently left a company or test out an app or website you just made to make sure it's working well. So there actually are like quite a bit of, agentic
Right.
capabilities
A
within.
and there's a I mean, I also saw that it's supposed to be like a browser too, because they're baking Atlas
Yeah.
into it as well. So, well, look, it is nice to see that they are starting to consolidate their product teams into one, because I think this is one of the biggest concerns that we have talked about on the show, is the extent to which the product portfolio is too sprawling. So I think that is certainly a smart decision there. Did you learn anything about the business impact that Codex has had on OpenAI, or how this might affect what they're expecting in terms of projections, or hopes for growing that 900 million users? What did we learn there?
Yeah, so I would say information here is fairly sparse. In terms of usage, Codex did recently pass 5 million, weekly active users, which that is up from, 4 million about a month ago, and then 2 weeks before that, 3 million. So usage is definitely growing, but even though we know the majority of those users are paid, there still is a really, big chunk that are not paying users. And so it's not really clear, how much that's actually adding to revenue. We do have a couple interesting little details in the piece we published yesterday around, Greg telling OpenAI employees last month that recently Codex revenue from enterprises had been growing 50% um, month over month, or sorry, week over week. And also Sam telling employees as well that the app had been, growing super quickly. I think it was 5% day over day in terms of usage. So if we extrapolate that growth rate out to a month, that'd be, growing over 4 times in a month. Um, so we do have these like tiny little details showing that like revenue seems to be growing, usage seems to be growing really well, but
And what about the customers, the users? Did you get a chance to talk to anybody about their reaction to this? Are people happy about this?
yeah, no, a lot of developers seem to really like Codex and said that it had really improved, especially since the beginning of this year. I think the main improvements there were some of the most recent model releases, especially GPT 5.5, which they said made it a lot better at, longer running tasks. A lot of people really loved the app, which, makes it easier to work with Codex if you're like a non-technical user like I am, for instance. In general, what I kind of heard from a lot of developers is Codex is really good if you have if you have a set plan going in and then maybe it's a very complex task and you need to be able to trust that whatever coding agent you're using or agent in general is able to follow that plan very, very specifically versus some people were saying that Claude Code is better whenever you come in and you don't really know what your plan is. You're like, okay, I want to accomplish this general goal, but I don't really know how to go about that. Because Claude Code maybe for some developers is better at like making those reasonable choices itself and deciding, like, what to do in a certain whenever it wants to achieve a certain goal.
Right. Great. Well, Steph, I want to thank you for coming on. That is Stephanie Palazzolo, our AI reporter here at The Information.